Well, hello everyone. It has been a few weeks. I've been traveling. I was recently in Sacramento, lobbying to state legislators that they should actually start caring about housing. Um, we're going to talk about something interesting today that I think is a bigger topic, and it really is the hallmark of the market that we're in, and that is uncertainty. So let's go ahead and get started. My name is Stephen Meade with Domicile real estate for people who love houses, which hopefully that is you if you are watching this. And this is our Southern California housing market update. And I want to do a brief introduction here. We often talk about things like prices, inventory, availability, and those things are all very important. But something that is far more intangible, and I think just as important, is this notion of uncertainty. And I think that really is sort of the mascot for the market that we're in right now. When I talk to people on the ground and when I look at the data, that's really what stands out to me. And so we're going to talk a little bit about why that means this is a very different market depending on what price range you're in and depending on what area you're looking in and depending on what end of the market or property type that you're looking at. You may be having a very, very different experience in this market. Even the type of home in your market segment that you are interested in could have a huge difference on what sort of a market you're going to experience when you're out there in the marketplace. So let's go ahead and get started. All right, so the first thing I want to look at here is active listings. And as usual, we divide this to under a million and 1 to 2 million. And guess what? Both of these numbers are up significantly and almost up by the same amount versus last year. So, last year we were at around the 5,000 level for under a million. This year we are just shy of 8,000. And then last year we were under, maybe around 3,500 or so. And now we are probably close to 5,500 for that 1 to 2 million category. This is, of course, across LA County. But as I've said a couple times in the past, I do not think that this tells the whole story. And I think part of that is this doesn't tell you what kind of homes are for sale. And I think we're in a market where we have a lot of homes that are for sale, but I'm not entirely sure how motivated the sellers are. And again, this comes back to that notion of uncertainty. One of the things I'm going to talk about in a second, I'll wait until the next slide here, is, let's see here. If we're looking at our last 14 days of new listings, right, you can see that things have really shot up a bit. And in fact, this is a much higher level of homes hitting the market really than at any point we've seen in the last year. I think that's noteworthy, right? I think we're seeing a lot of homes hitting the market, but I don't think it's quite as simple as that. And again, the reason is I think we're seeing a lot of these homes hit the market without necessarily motivated sellers. These are, I'll sell if I can find another house that I want. I'll sell if somebody will give me the price that I want, which may or may not be close to the market. These are, I'll sell if I don't have to do anything to my house, right? So we've got kind of a bunch of, I call them conditional sellers, right? Like these are people that are not a 100% guarantee to want to actually sell their home. What they want to do is test the market. What they want to do is see what they can get and see what their options are. Now, if we go here to new escrows, we see the flip side of this, right? And the flip side of this is that we are right about where we were at last year for that 1 to 2 million category, but under a million, we're actually less in terms of new escrows. And I want to talk about a very big difference between buyers and sellers right now. And I think this is wildly important to understand. If you are a home seller and you decide to put your home on the market, you can put it up at pretty much whatever price you want. You can sit back and wait. You can decide not to sell. However, if you are a home buyer and you are writing offers on homes, if that offer is accepted, you have made an obligation to purchase that home. And so I think that's why you're seeing that, we're seeing all these homes hit the market, but we're not seeing a commensurate increase in escrows. I think it's because uncertainty hits these two different groups very differently. A buyer, they are not willing to commit right now. I think people are afraid of, they just don't know where the economy is going. They don't know what prices and inflation are going to look like. I think there are so many balls up in the air. People are not necessarily comfortable making a huge purchase. Meanwhile, you've got people who are comfortable testing the waters on a listing for their home. So if we look at that absorption rate, I mean, that really kind of tells an interesting story here. This is probably the lowest absorption rate we've seen other than around the turn of the year there. Excuse me. In the last year, I mean, we're approaching 50%. That is really close to a market equilibrium. But again, I think it's a little bit of a mirage because I don't know if all these sellers are actually there to sell their homes. I think they're there to sort of test the market and maybe wait and see if they get what they want. Because if we look at our closed prices, right, and again, remember, this data is, 4 to 6 weeks old on average, but you'll see some price growth. And so what does that tell you? That tells you that while there is an abundance in the absolute number of homes for sale, there may not necessarily be an abundance in the homes that people actually want to buy. And I know I've mentioned that before, but this is a hill I will die on. I think the quality of inventory that we have in our market is not nearly as high and it is degraded, right? Perfect quality inventory is a group of sellers who are all interested in selling their home at the market price if the buyer came along tomorrow. I do not think that is the group of sellers that we have. I think only a portion of those sellers, probably a majority, but certainly not everybody, is in that category. And that's the reason why we're still seeing, despite the fact we have a low absorption rate, despite the fact we have all these things, why are we still seeing pressure on prices? Now, if we look at our percent still active on 14 days on market, that has actually gone up a little bit, but it's still in a zone that we've been playing in. And I think that again should tell you a little bit something about what kind of market that we're in. Now, if you look at our close to list ratio, this is another one that tells us that the reality is for the homes that are selling, right? So this is not every home in the market. This is for the homes that are finding buyers and actually closing. That close to list ratio is close to 100%. What does that mean? It means that for the sellers actually interested in selling, their idea of where their house needs to be priced and what it ends up going for are actually pretty close to one another. And that really indicates more of a market balance. And that's part of the reason why we don't just use absorption rate when we're talking about this, because absorption rate is really sort of like looking at that balance of supply and demand, but it's looking at it from one perspective. This is another way to look at that supply and demand perspective, right? Is where are the prices ending up versus what sellers are asking for? How in balance or out of balance are those? And if we look again at our days on market for new contracts, so again, this is not the average days on market for everything for sale. This is the days on market just for the homes that are actually finding buyers. And guess what? That number is holding pretty steady, and it's only around in the low 30s for days, which is still a pretty tight market. So again, that tells me there's an abundance of homes on the market, but there's not an abundance of homes with realistic sellers and homes that people want to actually buy. Now, if we look at our affordability chart, right, this is probably one of my personal favorites because this really tells you about that calculus that buyers are making in the marketplace versus renting. And the reality is, renting is not such a great deal right now either. We had kind of a turbulent last few months with rentals. You can see that huge jump there. What was that? Well, that was the Eaton and Palisades fires. Things kind of crashed out a little bit, and then they've been on a little bit of a steady gain again. And if you look at our payment index there, we are right about 2 sections of graph here, right, for that buy premium in terms of the payment that you're going to pay on a median priced home, whether that's a median priced rental single family home or a median priced home for purchase across LA and Orange County. We've noticed that those two numbers that relationship between those numbers is somewhat holding steady. I'm not surprised by that. And that tells me that from kind of an affordability standpoint, our market is not wildly in trouble. I think a lot is going to depend on inflation, wages, stock market, some of these bigger economic things that we don't really have the answers to yet. Now, finally, if we look at our prevailing mortgage rates, what do we notice from this graph? The great lessening of rates that was expected in 2025 has yet to materialize. I am doubtful that it will materialize at all in the next couple of quarters. Maybe it will materialize in Q4, possibly, but I'm just not seeing we haven't seen the Fed take action, and we've also seen the bond market, honestly, has been pretty beaten up. It's sort of a collateral damage, if you will, of kind of the trade war is that foreign countries who hold US bonds and treasuries are selling them off. And what does that do? That artificially raises rates, which is why they have held steady. And despite the fact that there are definitely some economic storm clouds gathering, while we haven't seen kind of a wholesale drop in the mortgage rates like you might expect. The other thing I want to talk about and touch upon briefly here is this is a chart for the 30-year fixed rate mortgage. I will tell you that most of our clients are not choosing 30-year fixed rate mortgages right now. Most of our clients are choosing 7/1 ARMs. They don't know where they're going to be over the next 7 years. And their expectation is that there may be a refinance opportunity over those next 7 years. And right now, that can be a pretty significant discount on the rate versus a 30-year fixed to do that. So that's all I've got for this week. Again, I apologize. We've been MIA for a couple of weeks. The main deal for that has been that mainly I have been traveling, as I mentioned. But we're right back here. If you or anyone you know is looking to buy or sell a home here in Southern California and you'd like actual strategy and expertise, that is what we provide in doing that. So our style of working is a little bit different. Obviously, questions and comments, we love those too. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I will see you again real soon.